Yeah, there's only one infiltration basin that's going to be pre-treated, and also as one of the requirements, the wells have to stay outside of those infiltration basins as well.
Okay. Next question, will the restrictions be similar to Poppy Field's restrictions? Have you reviewed those?
I would create my own restrictions. However, I think they're going to be, at or above in most cases. On this section of the property, we're looking at natural materials, which would be like a wood or composite wood, fiber cement board, minimum 612 roof pitch, dimensional singles, probably 25% stone requirement. We will have restrictions about pools, fences, and other items that can be a nuisance, and even with vehicles and how they can be left out and things like that. On the back section, we are going to have larger restrictions. I haven't determined the final number. It'll be at least 2,000 square feet for a ranch and at least 2,200 square feet for a two-story with an 812 roof pitch, 30% stone. Again, natural materials on the exterior. Again, we are the builder and the developer there, so we kind of have a vested interest that we want to make sure that we have good-looking homes in there so we can continue to sell the property as we move through. If you've been through any of my developments in the town of Waukesha, and they'll be very similar in restrictions to any of those. So if you maybe want to look, please look at Rolling Oaks development or Cider Hills in the town of Waukesha. I can say that in both those subdivisions, in Rolling Oaks, for example, we were targeting having $450,000 houses. I have several going in there that are $750,000, close to $800,000. So many of these are built by homeowners, and they are adding more than what we are requiring.
How about the ponds and the path? Who are they accessible to?
Well, the ponds and path, everything is going to be set up for some nature trails in there. I guess I haven't determined how that would work with neighboring. If they're accessible by the roadways, I think anyone can go on them. They're not going to be restricted to say that, you have to live in here to go on it. I'm not putting any of those type of restrictions on it, so there's no plans for that anyway.
Specific to lot 10, how will the home on that lot be orientated?
I think, is that 10? I can't see. Okay. Well, we're going to have a typical setback there. I think it's 50 feet front setback, 20 on the sides. Obviously, I don't know what type of home is going there at this point, but that'll be a pretty normal setback for a rural residence. And septic area has been at least a preliminary boring. Obviously, when we do go further through the process, again, this is only conceptual, but as we get further through the process, we'll have indicated where the septics are. Whenever I do development, I have all the soil tests done and complete before I would build out the subdivision, because I want to know that we can put septics on all of them. There's a lot of developers that don't do that. They're not necessarily always required to have individual septics, tests on each lot before they sell them, but I like to have that because I want to have that information.
The last question I have is that I wrote down is: are you aware of any other condos in the town of Waukesha?
I believe there's was some discussion about something with Merrill Hills. I'm not sure where that's at in the process. But single-family condominiums are becoming more and more popular. One of the reasons why we're looking at this project as well is that there is a lack of housing overall in the state, and one of the issues is that, especially for older people, they don't want as big of yards. They don't want as much maintenance. I can speak from example. My Cider Hill subdivision has over 1 acre lots plus. It's been harder to sell than my Rolling Oak subdivision, which has the 3/4 acre lots. People want the smaller yards. We also are getting the two largest segments of the population are the baby boomers and the millennials. And this product is designed especially for that consumer out there because they don't want as much maintenance, they don't want as big of a yard. But yet, again, a lot of this too is also with regards to preserving a lot of the open space within the subdivision and maintaining those natural resources and the natural beauty within the development.
Thank you. So let's take, that's all that I had, so let's take some more questions from comments. What was that?
Comments and questions. They don't only have to ask questions. They can make.
Fair enough.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening.
Dave Melenda. I own lot 31, which is in the upper left corner. So I live on Primrose Lane. So for the last 15 years, I've been honored to be the only one on Primrose Lane.
And an address for the clerk, please?
West 254, south 5243. So I guess obviously, you know, we don't have a lot to say in these types of things, but I'm curious as to why the connection happened. Currently, we have up there now a cul-de-sac. And so I guess if it was gonna be Primrose 2, Poppy Fields 2, or if there was gonna be, you know, an extension of our subdivision, I would understand why you'd wanna connect. But I was just curious why the connection to begin with.
I can answer that
That'd be
right away.
great.
That's,
Absolutely.
the policy of the town is and has been that when we have a cul-de-sac that's temporary, it comes into, it gets taken out, made, and connected.
So you mean just, that's the way we've always done it? Is that what you're saying?
No, Mike is, Mr. Dorr would make the comment.
That cul-de-sac on Primrose is designated as a temporary and designed as a temporary cul-de-sac.
Okay,
And temporary cul-de-sacs, as the name would imply, are designed to be temporary
okay,
and to lead into a road at some point.
okay.
Now, sometimes some point becomes an extremely long period of time.
Sure.
But if this would be approved, that would be that some point, so that's why that's connecting.
Is there something special about it? I mean, I'm just curious about what's special about a temporary versus permanent.
If the planner or somebody wants to address it, but the easements are different.
There's no bulb at the end of the cul-de-sac. It's not
What?
a bulb, a turnaround. Cul-
Yeah, there is. Yeah,
Is
sure.
it a full-size turnaround there?
Sure,
There's
absolutely.
one on Sage, and there's one
There's,
there.
yeah, okay, so the
So for
point
the
is,
last 15 years,
so
the
the-
car.
so the pavement is there, but there's no right-of-way there for it. So it
There's
actually,
no bulb right of way.
it actually goes onto, the right-of-way doesn't exist. So the right-of-way is a straight line, basically a 66-foot path, straight path that cuts across your properties, and the
Okay.
pavement is actually located on your property.
Correct.
So
Yep,
that's why it's temporary. At some point, when you plan these areas and you look to the future, it was always planned that this would be developed somewhere in the future.
okay,
And then when that subdivision was, I wasn't around at the time, but it was made temporary cul-de-sac because it was always intended to extend down to the south, whether it was Poppy Fields 2 or it was Pebble Brook Hollow. The extension was always a planned thing, and that's why it's labeled on the plat as a temporary cul-de-sac.
okay.
And the town's policy has been, when a development adjacent to that is built, it gets extended.
Does it have to be?
Yes.
Who said that? I'm
I
sorry.
did.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You know, we've had this in other subdivisions in the
Okay.
recent past, and the answer to that is
Okay,
yes.
okay, thank you. Then the
Can I
other,
just give you one other answer, one
Absolutely,
other piece
love
of
to.
information, and I don't know the extent to which this might apply to the situation at hand, but one of the town's ordinances is that any, basically, town road cannot be longer than a quarter of a mile or 1,320 feet in length. There have to be two directions. I'm not sure the extent to which this applies to that, but in many instances, there need to be connections as a practical matter, or some of those lengths would exceed the 1,320 feet.
okay, it is less than a quarter mile for clarification, so, okay.
Additionally, I am looking at the GIS map now, that Primrose is definitively a temporary cul-de-sac, and the bulb is not a standard 90-foot
Okay,
diameter.
so then when that gets repaired, whose responsibility is that?
That would be on the developer.
Okay, okay. Thank you. And then the question about the condos, so when you had mentioned that some of the restrictions that we had in Poppy Fields when I built 15 years ago, a couple of things. The square footage of the average size condo was not mentioned, so I don't know if we know that.
Okay.
Because we had, 2,200 square foot minimum for a ranch, and I don't know what the two-story was because I built a ranch, but I remember we had to add specifically a room to come in at 2,408 square feet, or 2,400 to get that 2,400 square foot minimum. I think the big issue personally is when you think about, we had side load, for instance, all our garages have to be side load, so you cannot, when you drive in any of our houses on the subdivision, you have to see the garage from the side. Every condo that I see has a front load, so obviously there is a diminish of the value right there. We had a minimum of 812 as a roof pitch. I think Mr. Belman said 612, and then there were some square foot issues. So I think if we were, because we're connecting to this, it would be helpful to at least look at what we had to build to. And you know, I would suggest that we have to look at those to make sure that we have some similarities, because to your point, we have some large homes, and then, you know, again, I don't know what those are. They look like they're 1,500 square feet maybe? No.
No, the,
You need to
Sorry,
address the board.
sorry, if you could
We'll
just-
get the questions answered.
Okay, thank you. So those were the questions. And then the other one was, the last question that I had was, you know, in my mind, and it's probably a misnomer, but when I hear condo, I think of rental right behind that. I mean, what prevents any of these from being purchased and rented out? So those would be my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Sandy Hamm, West 230 South 3827 Milky Way Road. I've repeated myself many times in front of this board as to my philosophy. I know that I'm in the minority, and you know, I think that I think R1 in my mind means that there's 1 acre per house, not 1 acre including some land down somewhere else. I believe that for a couple reasons. One, I think that, as I mentioned before, you know, you crowd people together. This is crowding people together with a nice big green space, but I think it changes the way everybody interacts. And I think that even though the town has gone ahead with these and these are popular, I'm opposed to them in general. I also wanted to thank you for your patience, and you know, you're enduring this. I think a lot of this is a NIMBY situation. The room is full. Lots of nights there's nobody here except a couple different people. And so whether it's a wedding venue and the room fills up, or whether it's Five Diamonds, or whether it's this, I had no idea it'd be this crowded tonight. But I listened to the attorney's lecture on Act 67, and I listened to, I think every person that spoke so far is adjacent to this property or nearly adjacent to this property. And the reasons that they're giving for being opposed to it are very similar to the reasons that the folks that were opposed to the wedding venue were opposed to. And those were mostly deemed to be not relevant. They were not substantial evidence. And I'm not telling you what to do, but I think there's a lot of people here with those same kinds of concerns that need to understand that the fact that you might not like it is not really one of the things on the matrix. You know, it doesn't say do the people like it. You know, maybe if you can prove your house value is going to go down, or maybe something like that, but otherwise most of these things are just personal. I mean, the guy had a beautiful view for years and years, and now it's going to go away. Well, that's not a reason. We'd like it to be a reason, but Act 67 pretty much says it's not. So I hope people take that to heart and let this thing move along, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. And that's a good point. And I would venture a guess that nobody in the audience knows what Act 67 is. It's a law that the state legislature passed in November last year, something like that. And it's called the Landowner's Bill of Rights. You'll see us go through the Plan Commission and Board an extensive matrix of questions about whether or not the residents and or the developer supplied substantial evidence that he's met the conditions that the planner has laid out in the conditional use in PUD. And so things like Mr. Hamm said, that these are, I used to have a great view and now I'm not gonna have a great view anymore. That's not a substantial evidence thing, that just is something. So if you were to come up and say, I did a study and these homes are gonna decrease my land value or my home value by $100,000, and here's my proof, and the proof is, you know, from some appraiser or realtor group or something like that, that's the type of thing that we would use to consider, and that's all that the state now allows us to use in determining whether or not the developer is meeting the conditions of the conditional use. So that's that explanation. Anybody else? Good evening.
Evening, John Balstrary, S54W25616, Hazelhurst Lane. A couple of items here is, I do question the PUD status of it getting the whole 1 acre thing. There's that aspect that we've talked about multiple times. I don't think I need to repeat myself there. We do question, my wife and I have been going through the math here, and the numbers aren't adding up. If you talk about average of 10 trips per family added at 55 units, that's 550 trips added, not 390. There's a big disparity there of a significant percentage. 390 trips is only 7 trips per unit that they're proposing here. The other question here, we talk about 4,000 northbound trips per day on Oakdale. If you go under the assumption anybody going north is going to come back south, we're talking about 8,000 vehicles on this road per day. And obviously that's concentrated typically in the morning and the evenings. Anybody living there understands full well that there's an issue. And one of the questions I would want to understand is, what are the regulations with regards to state that at some point in time that's going to affect us, to cause them to study and reduce the speed limit on Oakdale, because it is getting to be a problematic with school bus pickups, things like that. I know several of us have probably had several close calls with accidents on Oakdale already, with people not obeying the speed limit and flying past you. One good question I do have is regards currently on the access point there for the driveway for the entrance to the proposed subdivision here. There currently is at that extra lane on the right-hand side. Is that going to be maintained there as, let's say, a right-hand turn lane?
You need to address the board. So
Sorry.
what's the question?
The question specifically is on, currently at that intersection there where the proposed entrance is, Oakdale is on the northbound side is currently the primary lane, and then there is a secondary lane to the right of that. Is that going to be maintained as continued, as they say, a right turn lane to gain access, to get those vehicles entering that subdivision out of the main traffic lane?
Okay.
That's a point we have there.
And your question regarding you mentioned 4,000 northbound traffic, and I think you had a question about who determines the speed limit?
There is that aspect there, because their traffic volume has been increasing in Oakdale in the 12 plus years we've been there, and that's the question, is what point, we're adding more and more to it, what are the criteria for the governing body, who covers that?
That would be the county, and that's really a question for them.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
That's it. Thank you. Anybody else?
Good evening. My name's Randy Lund, Sage Road West at 52, South 5235.
Evening.
Good evening, sir. Share some of the same concerns, obviously, the traffic. We're on the north side of that boulevard. I have a question about the boulevard. What's the difference between that and the other roads in the subdivision?
There's a median, a divider in between the in and out.
And will there be plantings in that, or?
I will ask that question.
We're somewhat concerned, the flavor of that area is kind of rural, and we'd like to keep it that way, obviously, so we're wondering if, they would plant trees along that road, or narrow the road down, or do something to minimize the impact of that road along there. If this is going to be a multi-phase.
The entry road.
Well, actually, the one connecting the two roads between the one in the middle, they're running east-west.
Okay, and you said, would they narrow it?
Or would they do something that's wider, in other words? It's going to be a median down the middle?
Bless you. No, there wouldn't be a median down the middle of it. And it's going to be built to a town standard. We have standards for the roads on how wide they have to be and so forth.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lee Carmichael. I live at W256S5291 in Oakdale. I'm kind of on the other side from where that's being built up. And I guess, I'm not really necessarily opposed, or I'm just here to find out some more information about the project and everything. I guess my big concern was around traffic and, living on that road. Clearly the developer doesn't live there and hasn't been there at 6 o'clock or at 6 a.m. when it's very, very busy. I would say for the people who live in the other neighborhoods, what's going to happen is traffic is going to shift from that dangerous, there's a Glendale Road up to the north, and it's a very dangerous turnout. And what's going to happen is everybody's going to drive from Glendale into this entrance. And so the traffic is going to start shifting around. And I'm curious, what does a DOT assessment mean? What is that process? How do we find out what they looked at for capacity and all those other things? And that's kind of my big concern. How do we make sure that the road, as it continues to get busier, it stays safe? And then I guess my other question was, I just wasn't understanding how many condo units there were. I actually think it's a great way if we can find ways to keep folks that are of a different generation in our neighborhood still, because I know the maintenance becomes a burden, and there wasn't really a talk about accessibility in houses and those pieces. I know everybody kind of builds their own thing, and I don't know if the town board has thought about that as part of a standard, as part of that PUD, which I'm guessing is what, public urban development plan or something.
Thought about a standard of what?
Well, around accessibility in houses, new houses that are being developed, making sure that they have some set of rules that as people age in them, we can kind of make sure that they're still available for kind of those generations to still live there.
It would be single-family homes are built as per the Uniform Dwelling Code.
Oh, okay.
And that really, the Uniform Dwelling Code does not address accessibility.
Okay. And that's not something the town board would be interested in thinking about, because we want a community, right, that's diverse and that's a little broader. So maybe it's something for you guys.
The state of Wisconsin really governs building code, and has adopted the Uniform Dwelling Code. Probably, and I would suppose that virtually every other state in the country has also.
Oh, sounds great. Yeah, and then my other concern is just around during the construction, and if it's going on for 5 years, what is the toll? If once again, the Oakdale Road, it has a lot of traffic. How do we make sure that it doesn't beat the road up worse? Doesn't really degrade people who want to sell in that 2 to 3, 4 year period while that's going on? Once again, I don't think it's unsolvable, but I think it's good to have a clear plan of what's going on for that. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's answer some questions. So, first one I got is, how are you going to make sure that Oakdale Road doesn't get beat up?
That was the question of how to make sure Oakdale Road doesn't get beat up?
Yes.
Okay, well, first of all, when we're doing developments, we do have to follow guidelines. So if we have to put in tracking pads, we're gonna have to maintain and keep dirt off the roads and those kind of things. So there are, I believe, town ordinances for all those kind of things, as well as from the time that you can start and the time you can stop working within the town. So our land development companies that we hire to do that work are aware of those things and will stay within the town ordinances.
Average size of the condos, or minimums and maximums?
Sure. Well, we have 6 different buildings styles, floor plans. The one ranch that I have is 1,950 square feet. The other one is 2,100 some square feet. I don't have it right in front of me. As far as the 2 stories, they are all over 2,400 square feet at a minimum, with one of them almost at 2596 or something like that. So that's going to be those sizes on those. Again, on the single family homes in the back of the subdivision, we're looking at probably around 2,200 square feet as a minimum. These homes actually are 812 roof pitch. The reason I mentioned 612 is that I haven't committed to the exact roof pitch yet. Part of the reason for that is that, as you know, the economy changes, and the more restrictive you put those restrictions on, if the economy changes, and you need to adjust the building product rather than having a subdivision sitting empty because it's not, for lack of a better term, marketable at that time. If you have a little bit smaller restriction, you have the flexibility. You can always go bigger, but once you have this restriction set, if you do need to go slightly smaller, you can't do that. And with Rolling Oaks, we have pretty minimal restrictions, and like I said, I'm building houses that are in excess of $700,000 in there, and that's what the market is wanting, and it's consistent with our product line that we typically build.
Can you address the perhaps diminished value, of front-load garage versus a side-load garage?
Sure. Most of these are going to be 3-car garages. Now, being a condominium and because of the setbacks and the extra density, that's why we are looking for front entry garages. Again, on this section here, that's going to be a requirement that they're at least 3-car garage. And the requirement would be, unless there's a situation where there's some sort of issue, we would be looking for side entry on all of these here. The only situation that may allow us to do a front entry there would be as if we have some sort of a ranch design or something like that where it just doesn't quite work and we need to go with a front entry 3-car garage. We do, in Rolling Oaks, for example, in the town of Waukesha, we do have front entry 3-car garages in there. I don't believe that detracts from the value in that development at all. It's been very marketable. We haven't had any issues selling those. I also did not address in my comments, but you had mentioned these 2 lots with the building pads. Was there significant enough space? We have at least 60-foot by 60-foot building pads, which we have numerous homes. We have over 50 different homes that we can build, and I would say that we have probably at least 20 or more that would fit on that building pad.
Next question, can the condos be rented?
We would not want to see rented condos in our development because that would hurt the marketability of it. So typically with our condos, they do have covenants and the restrictions about leasing those units and those type of things. So this is not my intent to make these rental units. This is residence. This is going to be properties that we want people to live in. That's my jingle.
Wow.
Checking out the subdivisions. And there was an ad.
You mentioned 55 home sites with 10 trips per day and came up with 390 trips.
I should mention that there is a traffic table that's used that there's something that they use to calculate the number of trips, so there's a factor in there. So if you look at the math, that doesn't make sense, but there's a factor in the traffic tables that our engineer used to calculate that data.
Turn lanes, are you going to have ingress and egress lanes coming into your
Yes,
entrance?
there will be a turn lane outside the subdivision onto Oakdale.
Okay. Plantings in the median at the entry.
Bear with me one sec. Here's the layout for the entry. As you can see, we do have on the drawing, we show a preliminary landscape plan. So let me go back one. So this section right here, we're providing a boulevard, which is this. So from the top view, you can see the road on either side. So, coming out and coming in. And we'll have a very nice entrance sign and also some plantings here. As my engineer had mentioned, we are looking at doing some sort of a landscape berm here. We have not went to the point of doing a landscape drawing at this point, again, because it's conceptual. That's something we would get to when we get to the preliminary or final plat. It's just not worth investing all the resources and drawing all these things up before you get a development approved.
So, can I just add to that question, Mr. Chairman?
Please.
So what is the length of that median at the entrance there, approximately?
Keith, you're the surveyor to give it.
I'm gonna take a look at the plan.
So, well, we're talking, 20, 30 feet, right?
Oh, I think it's a little bit more than that. I think it's closer to 60 feet.
But that's the only median in the development, right?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
So there's no median that runs down Hidden Hollow?
Oops.
Yeah, it'll be about 80 feet.
Okay, but there's no median that runs down any
No,
other road?
no, sir.
No.
I got the impression when the gentleman asked the question that he might be thinking that there was a median that ran down Hidden Hollow, but this is the only median?
That's correct.
Okay.
And it's more for aesthetic purposes to have a nice pleasing entrance, which is pretty consistent with most new subdivisions.
Okay, thank you.
The next one I have is how many condo units?
So we have 19 single family, and then that would be 36 single family condos.
Okay. Thank you. We can keep going with questions.
Yeah, hi, Corey Barber, South 52, West 25093. Look at this land, and I was wondering, what is all wetland on this on his property, because it looks like there's a lot of wetland, and the reason he did the condos in there is because he couldn't fit houses on where wetland is.
Okay.
So my question is that the reason he's putting condos on this land here instead of single-family homes? Is just wondering if it was deemed wetland when he went to put a subdivision in here, and they said, oh, okay, this is all wetland. And that's
Okay.
why he's putting all the condos in.
And your road for the clerk, please?
Pardon me?
The
Oh, Sage
road-
Court, I'm sorry.
Sage, okay,
All right, thank you.
thank you.
My name is Pete Loznicki. I live on S45 W25665 Red Oak Court. And I also own the land that's south adjacent to this project. For a question for the Plan Commission, how long, maybe you can look it up, how long has this been zoned R1? I'm guessing it's been R1 for a long time, and so as a community, we should be aware that there was a plan for development for this for some time, and with that comes traffic. So again, as a community, we should be aware of it. The gentleman who spoke earlier who said that people coming off of Glendale, turning on Oakdale, it's extremely dangerous, couldn't be more spot on, and this, with more traffic, will exacerbate that. There was some discussion about temporary cul-de-sac. So in the southwest part, there's a cul-de-sac there. Is there an expectation then that the land to the south will have a property there at some point in time?
Maybe you could point out exactly where you're looking.
Right here, I think this is a cul-de-sac, and then I'm guessing that's a temporary cul-de-sac, so I'm asking, is this developing at some point in time then? Is that the expectation?
In interest of time, I'll just answer that real quick. No, that's a private road.
So it's a private road with a dead end, even though it looks like a cul-de-sac?
It's a cul-de-sac.
And then if the developer could address, I know that he said it in his presentation, something about this, but I didn't quite understand what he was explaining there.
Okay.
What that road is doing and why it's there.
Okay.
My understanding is that the homes for R1 are supposed to be an acre, and that there's a width of 150 feet, and my understanding is the 150 feet needed to be right along the road, and I just wanted to know, A, is my understanding correct, and then B, if it is there a minimum of 150 on all of those properties? And then lastly, we did talk about the development being single-family homes and condominiums. Was there any consideration given to just staying within the R1 residential and making the development all R1 compliant versus the condominiums?
Thank you.
Good evening.
Evening.
Jim Huffman, South 53, West 25874, Hazelhurst Lane. So I understand the desire to build condominiums for the reasons they stated, millennials, older folks looking for less maintenance. I don't understand why we need the dense pack. I think they might look really out of place in the neighborhoods around them. I live in Hazelhurst and the other resident neighborhoods around this. I think they're really gonna look out of place. So a simple question, why the dense pack?
When you say dense pack,
The small lots, the proximity to each other. And that's it, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question? Sure. It's really procedural in nature, and you can maybe pass this along when you get to Mr. Belman or his team, but the question is, because we've stumbled across this badly in the past, whether he and his team have got a copy of the matrix or the decision worksheet we're going to use, and if they've been advised that on every one of those things, they're going to have to, in their presentation, provide the substantial
evidence, because we're going to be asked the question of whether they provided substantial evidence. And just looking at this quickly, I think there's some of those things that have yet to be addressed. And I mean, we stumbled badly on it in the past and basically not been able to move forward. So I have a concern about if there's complete understanding and just an instruction that every one of those things, I believe, you have to make an affirmative argument to, or otherwise we're going to stumble badly when we move ahead with this.
We have been so advised, and we do have a copy of the matrix, yes.
Thank you. Evening.
Hi, Heidi Ballestroy, S54W25616 Hazelhurst Lane. So I'm concerned about the construction noise being right across the street from where this is going to be built. Just yesterday, I took a phone call from my daughter who was home by herself, and she was worried because she thought that there was thunder. It turns out that it was just the house being demolished across the street right where this is planned. There's a lot of concern about the noise that's going to be happening here. Also, are any of those construction equipment, because we've had this in the past, going to be on Hazelhurst Lane itself? Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy, do you need? Sandy Hamm, Milky Way Road. Sorry to come up here a third time, although it sure beats citizens' comments. I would like to ask you to ask Mr. Belman regarding the earlier question about somebody renting out these units. I found Mr. Belman's answers to be evasive or couched in a manner that was non-committal. And he said, you know, they don't, it's not his intent, they have no plan, and that they often have, he didn't use the word codicil, but they often have something in the agreement. But he didn't say that that would be the case in this case. And so I'm looking for a firm confirmation that in fact these units don't be, I guess it would be called sublet or whatever, and that would give me some assurance. Thank you.
May I ask one more question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
And if I missed this in the presentation, I'll apologize, but looking for the response to what road standards would be used for Pebble Brook Court, the private road, and also representation on the maximum grade on the public and private roadways. I understand you may be at preliminary engineering on that, but that's a question that we're going to have to address with this decision matrix. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Questions, comments?
Real quick, Tom Waller again, Poppy Fields Road. So I just did a quick study. 1,950 square feet is 18% less than 2,400 square feet. So it's not really reasonable to think that there'd be no effect on property values. Obviously, I haven't done a full study, but you all own homes, you understand how this works. It's not reasonable to think that there's not going to be effect on home values to the adjacent properties there. So if there's a way to encourage the planning commission to require similar construction and requirements and so on, that might be a way to sort of smooth this over a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Evening.
Hello again, Jackie Farber, Sage Court. One thing I wanted to clarify is that I'm not opposing it. I knew it was going to be here. And actually, I think it's a very beautiful layout. I really do. And it's way different than what I imagined it to be. We just have concerns, and we just want answers to some questions so that we can, comprehend, and hopefully I don't want to say we can all work together to make everybody happy. A big question I have is this homeowners association, and we have a homeowners association in Poppy Fields, and I don't wanna say it kind of fell apart, but is Belman going to see to it that this homeowners association is going to continue and that it's going to really comply with whatever he's putting in his restrictions? And the upkeep of, and can you explain again the property that is going to be kept up by this homeowners association? Because I know we had like a lawsuit go on with one of the retention ponds and plantings and who knows what, and that was huge, and.
So what was that, can you repeat the question for me?
Basically, the homeowners association, I wanna know who's going to be, if he's going to be monitoring this homeowners association,
Yeah,
or
that one I
is he
got.
going to let them take over eventually?
Okay.
And, who's to say it's not gonna fall apart, and what areas are going to be kept up by this homeowners association, like with grass cutting and weed clipping, and we had something in our restrictions about the retention pond and cleaning it out and dredging it, and that was a big problem that we had. And are those little ponds that you have in there, are those man-made? Those aren't already there, right?
We'll find out.
Okay, I know the Pebble Brook is already there, so I've never walked the property, so I don't know. I think that was about it, so thank you.
Okay. Let's get some of these answered. So the first one I have is, do you have a wetland delineation for the property?
Yes, we have a wetland delineation, and it's been assured by the DNR, and we've had them out multiple times looking at the site, and they've assured the delineation.
And on that particular slide, is the wetlands depicted by the dark green?
No.
That's wetlands. That's wetlands. That's wetlands. This is the pond. These are existing ponds within the wetlands.
Okay, and that was the next question I was gonna ask is, are there any of those ponds that are man-made retention ponds or detention ponds?
I don't think they're man-made.
Okay,
They're in the middle of the
they're
wetlands.
existing.
They're existing ponds. We're
Thank
not
you.
making anything new.
Perhaps, Sean, you could answer this question. Do we know how long this property's been R1?
I do not know.
Okay. Then there was a question, I believe, about Sage Road and the connection, potential connection, and I think you touched on it earlier, that there was a piece of landlocked land?
Correct. I don't know if we have the overhead county photo aerial. Great. Oh, if you could zoom out a little bit, perfect. There we go. So this section, yeah, right there.
This here is wetlands, and this is wetlands that connect down to the creek. So when we bring see how this is all wetlands? So the reason we're stubbing this road in here is for this land here could be developed, because as it is right now, it's all surrounded by wetlands. So we worked with the town's planner and the county and came up with the idea that this road needs to extend here because of that.
Very good. Is the width of the lots 150 feet on all of the lots?
Are you referring to the back section?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, is it, Keith, that you did this earlier?
It's measured at the building setback, so you measure 50 feet off the right of way for lot width, not at the road right of way. But
Okay.
even though it might say 140 at the right of way, it pies out, by the time you get to the building setback, it's 150. And I believe that's the way you measure them, so I remember right.
That's correct.
That is accurate?
That is.
Have you thought about making the entire subdivision all just R1 1-acre lots?
Absolutely. In fact, my initial submission to the town and the county was all single-family residential 1-acre lots. And at the request of, or the suggestion rather, of the county and the town, they recommended that we look at this type of zoning and this type of ownership.
Okay. The next question I had was the density and how close, the proximity of each building to the next one. I'm not sure what that question, I didn't write that down well, I guess.
Well, again, regarding the overall density, you have to remember that this is an 88-acre parcel, and we have 55 homes going on it. So again, I think as far as density, it's actually fairly low density on the overall use of the site. Again, a lot of the trend in development these days is to cluster your development more, again, to preserve more open space, less roadways. One of the things that's happened because of regulation, and I'll say it right here, the average cost added to a new home because of local, state, and federal regulation is $84,671. That's in Wisconsin. That's actually a study that's been published. What that means is the cost of building roads and homes is very expensive. So when you can combine things and keep them a little closer and reduce your road costs and things like that, you can try and reduce your costs of development. We have a affordability issue in housing, not only in the state of Wisconsin, but nationally, and it's not getting any better. And we are all trying to innovate and develop and create nice sites and make them also conform to all the different rules and restrictions, and also take advantage of our natural resources. And I think in this case, I think we've done a very good job of all of those things.
Okay, next question I have is, are you gonna park any construction equipment on Hazelhurst?
We have no plans to do that.
Can you be more definitive?
We have no plans to put any construction vehicles on Hazelhurst Lane.
Thank you. The next question was, can you give any further assurance of condos being non-rental units?
In the association documents in the declaration, we are going to limit or prohibit, let's say prohibit rental of those units.
Okay. What are the, do you have the maximum grades and road standards? What are you gonna build that private road to, what road standard, and what is the maximum grade you're going to have on any of the roads?
Well, again, part of the reason why we did this as a private road is that if you can see here, there's some quite a severe grade change. And so originally, the original design had this going, further into that heavy grade, which would have then had very steep building pads and steep driveways, which could have potentially exceeded the town ordinances for driveways. So by redesigning this, we are now pushing the building pads forward where the grade is minimal or less severe. That would keep the driveways within the town ordinance and also push those building pads forward. So I think that's, again, an improvement in the design, and then it becomes consistent with what the town is requiring. As far as the construction of the road, it will be built per the town standards.
Thank you. Next is Belman going to be in charge of the HOA? Will be delivered over to the association at some point?
Yes, so initially we will be in charge of the homeowners association, and then as we add units into the association, when you get to a certain percentage, we'll be adding one homeowner onto the association. And then when we get to, I don't know the exact percentages, but that's created in the document, in the declaration. So once we get to over half the unit owners, then we add a second homeowner onto the association. And then once we complete the project, then we turn that over to the homeowners association. Condominiums are going to typically have a stronger and a more longer lasting association than a residential community because they're dues paid into the association immediately. They're on a board, and you can believe you me, the grass doesn't look right or something isn't right in a condominium, the association hears about it and it's dealt with very quickly. We do have a condominium project in the city of Waukesha, which I'm on the board, and I can vouch for that personally.
Next question I have is, what areas are going to be maintained by the association?
Well, again, the entrance monument, any of the planting areas is going to be maintained by the condominium. The private road is all maintained by the condominium. That's actually an advantage for the town, that you don't have to plow this road. We do, and that's part of their dues. So that's one less thing that you have to worry about. Is there anything you want to add on that?
Well, they'll maintain their own properties, your
Correct,
own
yeah.
grass and snow plowing and all that.
Yeah.
The single-family lots, not the condominium. The condominium's not gonna cut their own grass, are they?
No, they're gonna have, the association's gonna take care of cutting that.
Mhm.
Got it. That's what I have. We can take some more questions if there are.
Oh, and I just wanted to add one thing too, and regarding your document here, we're more than prepared to, answer each and every one of these questions, and we feel like we checked all these boxes on your document.
Well,
And if you would like to go through that exercise, we'd be glad to do that.
No, you actually need to present that to us prior to us closing the hearing, because once we close the hearing, you can't give us any more information.
Okay.
So you need to, every question that's on there has to be answered prior to us closing the hearing. Once the hearing's closed, we can't take any more substantial evidence.
Okay.
May I just ask a follow-up question, as long as Mr. Belman's up there? Can you assure us that the maximum grade on all the public and private roadways will not exceed 10%?
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
Other follow-up? On your 1 acre, your residential in the back, you don't show even a temporary bulb on your road. There will be a temporary bulb to begin with?
Yes, there will be a temporary cul-de-sac there.
Thank you. 5-minute break? Yeah, we're gonna take a short 5-minute break, and then we'll reconvene in a moment.
I waved at you. Good. Just sold 2 years ago. Full price offer. Decided not to sell. I don't know. They do good work, but the problem is they're going to be too small for connecting up against what So we'll have to.
What do you think about here?
Yeah.